Alex, football's a cruel game, and you said Rotherham would provide a difficult and different test. They certainly did. Do you think the Coventry test will be similar in terms of the way they set up?
No. Played against Coventry earlier in the season, first game of the season, and I think Coventry find themselves in an unfortunate position where obviously the pitch hasn't been ready, and at the moment they're 3 games behind everybody else. I know they're bottom of the table. I don't think they'll be bottom of the table come the end of the season. I think they're considerably better than that, and I think their performances have reflected that. So we know it's going to be a tough game. We hope to try and play as well as we can. I think we've put 4 strong performances together in the bounce now, but we understand that obviously results matter as more than anything else, so we want to try and win, and hopefully we can try and perform as best we can.
They've obviously got momentum. They've had back-to-back wins. They won with an 87th minute penalty midweek, but apparently played really, really well. Consistency in this league seems to be a massive problem. I mean, you've got Blackburn up at the top who've had 7 defeats. If you look, as you will have, at the stats over the year, you probably need to have 13 defeats or less to have a chance of getting to the playoffs. Do you think that will change this year?
It could potentially, and I think that if you look at the season last year with Fulham were the outstanding team, weren't they? I don't think there's an outstanding team so far. Like you say, I think any team that's lost 6 games already and finds herself at the top of the division basically sort of is a representation of where the teams are at the moment. You can literally win a couple of games and go up probably 8, 9, 10 spots in the league, which is highly unusual, certainly at this stage. Normally people say after about 12, 13, 14 games the league starts to take shape. I still don't think it's taking shape at the moment, if I'm honest. I think that there's a lot to happen. I think if you look at how many managers as well have turned over, I think we're talking over 10 now, and we're only 14 games into the season. So yeah, I just think the Championship is really, really difficult, and I think the difference in the matches, hence the reason the lack of putting results together, the difference in the matches is marginal. I mean, it's literally the difference between taking an opportunity or making a mistake that costs you the game. I think there's very, very little between a lot of the teams, and it literally is a case of who turns up in the day. And I think that's been reflected on the results across the board.
Whilst you probably don't look at the match in terms of would you do anything differently if you had your time up?
I always look at it like that.
Do you?
Always.
So given that, if you're looking back at the game,
Yeah.
would you do anything differently? Would you change the formation or the tactics? Will that colour the way you look at the Coventry game? Did you find things there that will help you for Saturday?
No, well, I'll always look at the game like that. So if we don't win the match, or even if we do win the match, I'll always assess my decision making within the game, how we set up, the personnel that I picked, how I went about it, how I got to that point. I'll always reflect on that, always, particularly if we don't win. Second of all, I'm a big believer in the fact that fixing the last game does not present what we need to do for the next game. So no, what I do think is there will be games further down the line that are going to be very representative of what happened against Rotherham. That's probably when I'll cast myself back to that one. So if I'm prepping for another team and all the traits and all the strengths and weaknesses are very similar to what I've faced before, that's when I'll normally go back to that game, not the next game. If the next game is very different, I'll treat it on its own merit.
I mean, it's a different game when you have to make all the running yourself, when you've got several players just blocking you.
Yeah. I think what I feared before the game, and it was a topic of conversation with the players all the time, was we need to start bright, and I don't think we started as bright as we needed to. The kick-off summed it up for me. We kick the ball off and then we kick it out the park. I think the first throw-in, we have a poor throw-in, we turn the ball over, give them the throw-in. There's a switch of play, it goes through our feet and then it goes out for their ball. I mean, that's moments, albeit it's at the start of the game, there's still a lot of time left. That's moments that they then got an advantage of. Obviously we've discussed at length in terms of the actual corner and what happened with that, but yeah, you can't give anybody any advantage. You can't switch off for a minute, and if you do, sometimes it can come back to bite you. And unfortunately for us, giving them that sort of lifeline, shall we say, in terms of the goal, allowed them then to cling on for the rest of the game and sort of sit deep in their shape. Having said that, having watched the game back, We had ample opportunity to score. We needed to be more clinical. We weren't. I think what we did do in the last 20 minutes was we started snatching at things instead of showing a bit of composure and making that extra pass that we needed. But that will come with time. I mean, I think it was just eagerness to do the right thing, and ultimately it wasn't the right thing at the time.
I mean, there were so many positives to take out of the game in terms of the chances created. And another positive is that it looks like the treatment room's having less and less players in it. You've got more people to choose from now.
Yeah.
That must be encouraging for you.
Yeah, well, what it gives us more depth. Do you know what I mean? So when we're in the midst of a game, if somebody's underperforming or somebody's injured, we've got high quality, good individuals. To be honest, picking a team when everybody's fit obviously is going to be a really difficult decision, because the difference between one player to the next player is marginal. Do you know what I mean? It might be how he trains that week, it might be a case of who's looking better, who's maybe a better influence on the team, all these things. So, and I repeat this to the players when I'm speaking to them, how they go about their work, how they represent themselves each day has a massive bearing on what's going to happen for them in terms of starting. Because sometimes it's a difference between they two players are very, very similar, but his attitude's absolutely A1 and his is okay. So you're naturally going to pick the one that their attitude's absolutely tops, because that's the advantage that they provide for themselves. So the margins are very small now between the players. It's going to be a case of who's in form, who's best suited for the game, and like I say, who goes about their work on a daily basis the best.
Harry Souttar made a 45-minute comeback the other night. I see the Australian manager is reported to have said that Stoke have said he'll be back in the first team squad in the next couple of weeks. Do you want to comment on that, or are you going to say no comment?
No, that's my point.
No. Okay. Thank you for that. You seem totally focused on, as all top managers are, as all managers that do well, you're totally focused on that match, the next match, and the best you can get out of your players. After a game like the one against Rotherham, can you sleep at night, or are you tossing and turning, thinking about what you could do differently?
I don't struggle to sleep, no. But yeah, the first thing that enters my mind is what could I have done differently, should I have done something differently. What it allows me to do is then go back into my sort of experience of games in a similar type way. I did paint the picture for the players leading into the match that Rotherham don't need to play well. I think I said it at my press conference. It's one moment, it's one mistake, it's one set piece, and the game took the shape that I feared before the match, which is even more frustrating because I tried to warn against it because I knew it could be a possibility.
And given that you've said that the players weren't quite on it, or you felt that they were a bit sloppy at the start.
We didn't start well.
Right. Will you therefore try and make certain that they start well tomorrow? And can you see any signs? Did you see any signs before they went out that was going to happen?
No, the warm-up was very good. You know, the first thing I asked when the coaches come back in, how's the warm-up? Yeah, they're bright, they're ready to go. Yeah, we just didn't start brightly. You know, we obviously tried to put the ball into their channel, we kick it out of play. We try to take a touch, it runs under our feet. We have a throw in, we give the ball back. Yeah, they're just moments that, particularly at the start of a game, what happens at the start of any game is both teams normally go a little bit toe-to-toe at it, don't they, until it settles down. Some team takes precedence over the other, and then once you hurt them a little bit, they'll go, oh, right, they'll get scared, they'll drop back into shape, then you can control the ball. Or they'll move the ball better than us, we'll get damaged a little bit, and then we'll sink a little bit and give them a bit more respect. That's always what happens at the start of any game. Unfortunately for us, we've conceded in their moments far too often, you know, and that's been a problem because then we need to chase the game after that. So we need to find a way of competing and being in that first 5-10 minutes to try and get our superiority over our opponent, but without being vulnerable. And that comes through making good decisions with the ball, without the ball, and making sure you do that well. And I think we'll certainly get better at that. Well,
it'll be a good atmosphere tomorrow. Coventry bringing over 2,500 fans, so good luck.
Thank you.
Alex, obviously it's very important about the adaptability, the versatility of your squad in more ways than one, isn't it, really? And we've seen that in games where you've changed the system to, I suppose, cooperate with what the other side is doing. How important is it that you've got that versatility within this squad?
Yeah, I think it's vitally important. But to be honest, the only way I really use it is I use it in the main to make sure the spare player in the game's in our favour in terms of where we want it to be. Do you know what I mean? So that's how I manipulate in terms of how we're going to play. That's the main reason behind it. And if we're trying to obviously create chances, you need to try and somehow overload the back line of the opposition. It's where you're going to do that from that becomes important. So we've got a couple of key squad members that allow allow us to be flexible within our game. If they're not in the team, that becomes a lot more difficult.
Because when you've got that utility type of player, they're very important to the team, aren't they?
Yeah, of course they are, but providing they're performing. The fact is, flexibility is a great tool to have, but there's no point having flexibility if the performances aren't of a level that are going to win you matches. I mean, that takes precedence always.
You talked about Coventry, obviously, and against the major problems, they've come out of it quite well, the other side, with a lot of games they haven't played yet, but they've got a bit of momentum, and you've already probably alluded to they probably won't finish in the position they are at the moment. So they're a dangerous team, and Mark Robbins is a very experienced manager, isn't he?
Yeah, they're well coached. They've got good players. They're a good team. They've been missing a few key players as well. They've sold Hyam, who was a good player for them, to Blackburn. Sheaf's going to be suspended, which I think is good for us because I think he's one of their key players as well. O'Hare's been a key player. He's been missing since the start of the season. So, but they're well coached. They've been together. They've added a lot of layers to how they play in terms of different sort of aspects of their game. Yeah, it's going to be a tough match, no doubts.
You haven't had the loss, but you've got to build that momentum again, haven't you, now, and move it forward. And you've got the ability to do that and go on to the run, Alex, haven't you?
Yeah, but I think what happens is, like, how you lose a game does matter, doesn't it? In my opinion, I think how you lose a game matters, because I think if you lose a game and you look as if you give up and you don't perform and you're disorganised, I think that's much more damaging than understanding that sometimes it's not going to be your night. And I think that was the difference the other night. I think the other night it just wasn't our night for a variety of reasons, but I thought the performance, what the lads put into the game, what it meant to them, how they tried right to the last minute, you can't question any of that in my view. You know, I've watched the game back just to make sure, because sometimes when you watch games back you do take a different view on it. My view is the exact same as what I thought at the time. I thought the lads performance wise, apart from being clinical and apart from maybe having a little bit of a slow start, everything else in the game, we did it to a good standard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things that fans have been so impressed with your side is there's a certain verve to them. You know, even with the Rotherham game, they were coming out saying lots of positive things. What's been the most important thing that you feel you've done to the side to achieve that? Would you say it's something like fitness, or is it a more sort of like something like belief? Which is the most important of those two? You've had to concentrate on.
Well, the problem you've got is if you're not fit, you can't show your best qualities for a start. So I think fitness is vitally important. I think you get that in training. I think you get that in terms of how you're set up. I think understanding for the players in terms of clarity, what their jobs are, what their roles are. I think accountability is a big thing in football. You know, making sure that everybody understands. Like, if you know your responsibility is that job, you're accountable for that. So if you don't do it well enough, then I mean that's not going to be good enough for the rest of the team. And I think having an understanding of what they're doing, and then you get a couple of results, you build belief. But I think confidence is a big thing, and also togetherness. So when you create that togetherness and belief and everybody's fighting for the same cause, you can't pinpoint one thing because they all fold into each other. Because you can't be confident if you're not playing well. You can't play well if you're not structured. I mean, you can be structured, but if you're not fit, you can't get about the pitch. So all facets here sort of lead into one thing, if you like. And I think what we've done, it's took a little bit of time, but to be fair, probably quicker than anticipated. I think we've got to a really good level of understanding. I think tactically the players are excellent. I think they've got a really good level of how much it means to them and how we go about every game. And like I say, I think the last 4 performances for different reasons have been very strong, and we want to try and continue that.